Hi, guys, and welcome to a very special episode of Holy and Healing TV. As you may or may not know, it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I definitely wanted to take some time to discuss mental health in the Christian space and also just talk about some really unhealthy and hurtful stigmas that surround mental health in the Christian space. So maybe grab a notepad. I don't know. We're going to get into it. We'll see. But yeah, buckle in and let's get into it. Hi, guys. Thank you for coming back for another episode of Holy and Healing TV. I am glad you're here. Today, we have a really important episode and just something I hold near and dear to my heart, just the foundation of the whole idea for Holy and Healing, which is, creating a bridge and breaking the stigma between mental health and faith. I really wanted to dive into the unhealthy stigmas surrounding Christianity and mental health. Um, this is my emotional support animal, Shadow. He might be joining me for this episode. Are you going to behave? He's a little scared right now because there's some storms going on outside. But that's okay. Everybody needs a safe space. See, even animals need a safe space. And it's totally okay. Well, as long as you behave, you can stay here. Mommy's going to talk about mental health. Is that okay? Okay. All right. All right. So let's just dive right into it. I wanted to start specifically with some statistics that I found because in doing this, I wanted to deliver it with information and, just the science behind mental health, just to show that if you are struggling with mental health, anxiety, depression, you're not alone. There's so many people that struggle with mental health illnesses that go undiagnosed for a really long period of time. They feel like they're going crazy, that they, can't reach out for help, that it's their fault, it's something that they did, but it's not. So I did do quite a bit of research and I wanted to start with some of the things that I found. So this is coming from cdc.gov. I want y'all to take into consideration that this number seems small, but it's really not. So this was as recent as 2024. 5.6% of the US population experienced mental health illnesses. So what that breaks down to is 14.6 million people, or 1 in 20 adults. That's wild. And honestly, when we're thinking about coming from COVID and coming off the era where everyone was constantly being bombarded with entertainment and social media because we had nothing else to take our attention off of the state of the world, I do feel like mental health in that time definitely took a decline. We were never meant to have this much access to this much information in other people's lives that can cause, just the comparison. I lack this and they have that. And it's just, we were never meant to have this much access to other people. So I definitely feel like 2020 and COVID was just the start of mental health illnesses really being on the rise. Um, this was a statistic from last year from the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So this is NAMI, NAMI.org. 1 in 5 adults experience mental illness each year. 1 in 5. And Like just looking at these statistics, there's those like cliche sayings that are like be kind to everyone you meet because you never know what someone is going through. This is why 1 in 5 adults will suffer from a mental health illness every single year. So just think, you can count on your hand 5 people, and at least one of them is going to be suffering with a mental illness. And that to me is, it's not necessarily crazy in a sense, just because of the state of the world and everything that people are going through, but it's just, it's kind of one of those things that makes you want to move through the world as more of a kind person because you genuinely don't know who could be that person suffering with a mental illness. You could be the person that smiles at them, compliments their outfit, that just says something kind to them that stops them from hurting themselves that day, from hurting someone else that day. So it really does make you stop and take into consideration like the way you move through the world. Um, some other statistics that I found really alarming, um, was that there are 100,000 or more deaths by suicide every single year. And I did remember seeing that suicide is the second biggest cause of death for people in the United States. That's regardless of age, race, gender, whatever. Second largest cause of death in the US. And it breaks my heart because I will say, by the grace of God, I have never gotten to the point where I have had suicidal ideations, but I do know a lot of people that have. And just knowing that they got to a point where they felt like not being here was easier than living life, I can't imagine the pain you have to feel for that to be a decision that you make, you know? Um, and it just breaks my heart that people get to a point and that they feel like they need to do that, because I know with that comes, you're feeling isolated. You feel like you can't talk to anyone. You feel like you've exhausted all of your resources and there's nothing left for you to do but end it so you don't have to deal with the pain that you're feeling. And it really does. It breaks my heart that people get to the point that they feel like that. Um, I did know someone who did unfortunately commit suicide. It was a few years ago. I met him through my best friend, and he was one of the sweetest people I've ever met. He was so full of joy. Um, he was financially responsible. He was an entrepreneur. He went to school. He had a good job. He was working on, building an Airbnb business. On the outside looking in, he was successful. He went to church and he served at church and he volunteered, and just one of the funniest, like most loyal, kindest people I've ever met. And I'll never forget the call. My best friend called me and told me how someone went to do a wellness check on him because he wasn't showing up for things that he was supposed to be showing up for. And they found him, and unfortunately, he had committed suicide. And just, again, from the outside looking in, you would never think, like, wow, why would someone who appears to have it all feel like they would need to take their own lives? And that just goes to show you that mental health illnesses look different on everyone. Someone could appear to have it all and be completely miserable on the inside. So it's so important to talk to people and really get to the root of how they're feeling. So, like me, I'm the type of person, if I ask you how your day was, I want a 10-page essay. I want details. I want to know, like, what did you eat for lunch? Oh, what did your coworker say to you that made you mad? And you're like secretly thinking about it. You thought you're over it, but you're not. I need a full report. I need a breakdown of every single thing that happened. I don't get to talk to everyone in my life as much as I'd like to, but when I do, I always do a mental check in. Even with my best friend, like when we talk to each other, sometimes we'll ask, and this is a really good trick for people too. Not trick, but just something to be mindful of. Like when we talk to each other and we know one of us needs to unload, we ask the forefront question like, do you have the mental capacity for me to unload on you today? If you don't, I understand. We can schedule it for another time. But if you do, I'm going to word vomit and I need you to listen. And sometimes that's it. Sometimes people just need you to listen. I don't necessarily need you to offer me solutions, but I need to process through what I'm feeling and get it out of my head so I can maybe better understand what I'm feeling, if that makes sense. And also, even if she doesn't have the mental capacity for me to, okay, what are we doing? I need you to lay down, Bubs. Can you lay down? Come on, over there. Come on. There you go. Lay down, please. All right. So even if she doesn't have the mental capacity for me to unload the things that I need to unload on her, knowing that we have a set time for me to do that gives me something to look forward to. Gives me the hope that like I'll have a chance to unpack this with someone who's not going to judge me, who's going to listen to how I'm feeling. So I think that's a good thing that a lot of people you can implement into your conversations with the people that you are talking with and around all the time. Like, hey, I'm feeling some type of way about XYZ. Do you have the mental capacity for me to unload on you today? And that's another thing, like I said, mental health illnesses look different on everyone. So you don't know what other people are going through. So it's good to always test the temperature to see, like, because maybe they're dealing with something that needs more immediate attention. You know what I mean? And you never know. So that's why it's so good to just communicate and talk and have these conversations. Um, that is one of the stigmas I believe that we deal with in church and in the Christian community is you don't talk about mental health. And that's even a cultural thing, especially in black households and brown households. Mental health issues aren't a thing. You're depressed, you go depress them dishes, you're fine. And I think that like we have to get out of being afraid to talk about these things. Like, here's how we break that wide open. God literally sent Jesus to live a human experience so we could so he could understand what we experience on this side of heaven. Like, so all your anxiety, your depression, your fears, he knows we're going to experience those things. So I don't understand why it's such a taboo thing to talk about having depression, having anxiety, having fear. Now I know here come the people with the scriptures and everything talking about, well, God doesn't give us the spirit of fear. No, but that doesn't mean we're never going to experience it. That doesn't mean we're never going to have those moments of being human, because we are human. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And again, he sent Jesus to live out that human experience so he could better understand what we were going through, so that he could fix it and that we could turn to him to have him help us with these things that we're feeling and experiencing so strongly. Um, yeah, I definitely do feel like being afraid to talk about mental illness at all is one of the stigmas we need to release as a Christian. Release me as a Christian community. Like, it's okay. You're never gonna tell me that I'm not allowed to feel anxiety, that I'm not allowed to feel fear, that I'm not allowed to feel sadness and depression. Um, I just don't think that that's reality. And to say that, like, to put God in this box of that's not something he's going to touch or deal with is a lie from the pit of hell. And don't you ever believe that. God is God for a reason. He can handle your anxiety, He can handle your depression. Now, I will say, Jesus and therapy, okay? The two go hand in hand. And I do want to be careful about saying that because I know sometimes crossing that line, we can get into a little bit of idolatry when it comes to therapy um, in the Christian space, because you may end up relying more on your therapist than you do on God and on Jesus in that relationship to help you. But I do think we were called to community. We were called to be in rooms together, to pray together, hold each other accountable, to commune with one another, because someone's testimony about depression would help someone else. And I think where we can fix that and not crossing that line into idolatry when it comes to having Jesus and also going to therapy for your mental health is always going to Jesus first, always going to God first. And even like, hey, God, I want to start therapy because you know the things that I'm struggling with, XYZ. I thought I was over it. I'm being triggered. I have all this trauma I haven't dealt with. I need a therapist, that I can talk to. I need you to help me find someone spirit led, point me to the right, you know, therapy business, or, you know, help me bump into that therapist that's going to be everything I need them to be, and also point me back to you, and help me combat what I'm dealing with your word and with your love. I think that's how we kind of keep it in the middle, if that makes sense, and we don't cross that line into idolatry, and we also don't leave God out of the equation for walking with us through life and just relying on a therapist or a friend to you know fix our mental health issues, if that makes sense. um so going back to some of the other statistics that I learned, because I did want to address some of the stigmas that we deal with in the Christian space when it comes to mental health and things like that. So, one of the things I did look up specifically was for mental health illness statistics within the Christian community in general. Um, and this one was pretty alarming. Um, so, approximately 20% of adults experience mental illness in a given year, but around 64% of Americans identify as Christian. Mental health issues statistically affect millions of Christians. Any guesses as to why? Anybody wanna, any answers from the class? Okay. um, and then another thing here, it says a study of Christians by Kintsugi Hope revealed that 91% believe mental health remains stigmatized within the church. 100%. Um, the next thing here says, according to foundational research from Lifeway Research, 49% of Protestant pastors rarely or never speak about acute mental illness in sermons. So, we have got to start talking about it. We have got to start talking and addressing mental illness within the Christian community. Ignoring it does not make the problem go away. Just how they say to confess your sins and repent, because everything that's done in the dark will eventually come to light in one way or another. Not talking about mental illness and sweeping it under the rug does not make it go away. It makes it more prevalent. It gives it more power. It makes it worse. Um, just this here, that almost 50% of pastors don't address mental health in their sermons. Okay, I just heard. Sorry, I was listening. I was listening. Um, he told me that this is why it's so important to have a personal relationship with me, because yes, your churches and your pastors are meant to be there for community, for you to commune with me, for, you to learn my word. And yes, it's there for guidance, but it shouldn't be your end all be all. Okay? You've got to open the Bible, read the word for yourself, and develop your personal relationship and intimacy with God for yourself. Because looking at the statistic, and think about all of the newer Christians, all of the baby Christians that don't have that foundation and don't have the word of God in their soul and on their heart already, and know how to walk in the joy of the Lord despite depression and despite anxiety. Um, they will probably feel that pressure to not talk about what they're dealing with because no one's addressing it. Closed mouths don't get fed, y'all. You gotta speak up. You gotta talk. The best way to start fighting something and addressing something is to bring it out into the open so you can start developing, solutions for it. Um, this one here says despite the stigma, 60 to 65% of churchgoers suffering from mental illness want their local churches to talk about it openly. So there is a desire for it to be addressed. But I think there also has to be a certain bravery that comes with that. And not only a bravery, but an actual freedom in God. Like a true freedom in God. Like I'm not scared to talk about what I'm going through because I know in the end he's going to use it to bless somebody else, to help somebody else. You know, my testimony is gonna keep someone else from going through the same thing. It's going to point people towards God. So like that true freedom in Christ and knowing that whatever you're dealing with or whatever you're walking through or fighting, he's going to use it for his glory and for the good of something or someone else. So I think that, you know, being brave enough to talk about it openly and the things that you're dealing with also comes from having that actual true joy in the Lord. Like I don't care what anybody else thinks of me. He knows and I know he's going to use this to do something miraculous in someone else's life. And I think also I'm going to be real. I'm going to be real with y'all. I'm going to be so real with y'all. I've come across so many Christians that put God in a box, that are like their faith, like they're scared to truly like let go and let God have full control. Like they put him in a box. Like this is not King of Kings, Lord of Lords, God of the universe who created the universe in 7 days. He can handle your anxiety. He can handle your depression. I'm not saying that you shouldn't partner with him and use other resources to help you get through these things. But y'all, y'all, yesterday, today, forever. You feel me? He can handle it. I promise you he can. Um, so getting away from some of these statistics, because honestly, they're making me a little sad. I mean, I know that is the whole point of addressing mental illness and talking about mental illness in Christian spaces. Um, and just, I think it's such an area that we need to do better in. But I do want to address like some of the mental illnesses in general that people might struggle with. So, actually, if you didn't know, which I didn't know this, there are three specific types or categories of trauma. So, we have acute trauma, which is a single incident. We have chronic, which is repeated and prolonged trauma. And then we have complex trauma, which is exposure to varied and multiple traumatic events. Um, yeah, so those are three categories of trauma. Now, there are 5 types specifically of trauma, which I did know, because there's a blog post up on the website, and it's titled Unresolved: What a Sudden Family Death Taught Me About My Trauma. And I was just very honest and open about how the death of an uncle on my father's side of the family brought up unforgiveness and anger and resentment that I had towards my father and that side of the family for the way they treated my mother when she had me. And I did some research on the different types of trauma because I really wanted to get to the bottom of it and understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling. Not necessarily trying to justify my actions, but really understand that I was coming from a place of covering up this hurt and really just being in survival mode when it came to my relationships, because I had all these daddy issues and rejection issues and fear of abandonment, just things that I hadn't uncovered that were triggered by this one event. And I really was like, okay, whoa, what's going on? And you have to give yourself grace because you will operate at the level of your understanding. When you know better, you do better. So I really took it upon myself to, dive deep and try to understand as much as I could about my own trauma and what I needed to work on to have successful relationships in the future. So I do want to get into the 5 types of trauma because it actually is very important. Um, so the 5 types of trauma, and I do have it pulled up here specifically from the blog that I wrote. It's actually really good. I think you guys should check it out. Again, the website is holyandhealing.com. I've got some blogs up there. We've got some merch, shameless plug. And I do also offer prayer calls. So I'll get more into that towards the end of this episode. But I swear I was more prepared for this. Y'all give me 2 seconds. While I get my life together, I just wanted to remind you guys I do have some amazing faith based mental health merch available on the website at holyandhealing.com. I hope you love it as much as I love designing it for you guys. And I hope you guys are enjoying this episode. And let's get back to it. Okay, yes. So, getting into the 5 different types of trauma. And I can't believe that there's 5. I'm so glad there is because, hopefully this will help somebody. Okay, so first one is type 1 trauma. This is big T trauma, shock or acute trauma. Remember, acute trauma is a single incident. Um, Normally an isolated incident that has shock value and an unexpected timeline. These incidents have a large capacity for developing PTSD in the people who experience them. Examples of type 1 include severe illness or injury, violent or sexual assault, traumatic loss, childbirth, military combat, victim or witness to violence, and medical or psychiatric trauma. Okay, so that's type 1. Type 2 trauma, also known as complex trauma, which occurs during the early stages of life or during childhood development. You can also put this in the category of repetitive trauma, which is incidents that are repeated over a period of time. Often, this type of trauma includes personal relationships where someone can feel trapped emotionally or physically. Um, so, pausing there for a second, the most common form of trauma is emotional abuse. And when I learned that, I feel like honestly, this is kind of the foundation for why mental health illnesses run rampant in the Christian community. Because think about church hurt and legalism that requires that not requires but causes people to leave the faith because of that emotional, mental, and psychiatric abuse. The things that they do to your mind to make you feel like God doesn't love you. You're just a sinner and you're going to hell regardless of what you do if you don't do everything perfectly. The churches that abuse people on their media teams, or abuse their talents and their arts and tell them they're worth nothing to God if they're not completely burning themselves out and devoting all of their talents to God. There's so much emotional abuse in the church, and so it's completely understandable that mental health illnesses run rampant. 60%, 60%, okay, of Christians, of Americans who identify as Christians, experience mental health illnesses. So just let that sit with that for a second, okay? um, so yes, so we have discussed type 1 trauma. We discussed type 2 trauma. Now we'll get into um, secondary trauma. So, secondary trauma tends to be less common, but is still very real for those who experience it. This trauma usually occurs when an individual speaks to someone who experienced or witnessed trauma firsthand. The individual listening can take on a form of symptoms that the victim is describing by explaining their trauma in detail. So, secondary trauma, this one specifically for my empaths and for my people who have strong senses of discernment, this is going to be where you have to use that discernment on who you allow to trauma dump on you. Okay? If someone has gone through something so horrific and you know that it's not within your capacity to help this person, not professionally, not to the degree that they actually need help, refer them to a therapist, someone who is specialized that can handle what they need to talk through, because you're going to feel responsible for their trauma. You're going to want to take it on, you're going to want to help, and that is going to cause secondary trauma. It's almost like secondhand embarrassment. You're going to feel what they feel, and you're not equipped to take that on. I know you want to, especially if you love them. Trust me, been there, done that, got a t-shirt. It just, you cannot do it. You cannot do it. Please refer them to a therapist, a specialist, you know, any type of therapies that might help them, even groups that they might be able to go to. The best thing you can do for them is to offer resources. And again, obviously, you want to point them back to God, but if they are not in that space, you can do research for them, point them in the right direction to get them started. Just plant the seed and kind of let them do what they feel is best for them, but you cannot take on other people's trauma. Then you'll have two traumatized people walking around, and that's not good for either of y'all, you know? Um, yeah, so those are, I think I covered all of them. Yeah, so we did type 1 trauma, type 2 trauma. Um, we did secondary trauma, yes. And I believe, oh, yes, okay, here we go. This is what I was missing here. Little T trauma. Okay. So, this is the most common but least talked about form of trauma because the events that fall under this category are often less traumatic than type 1 or type 2. So, little t trauma will involve everyday struggles such as moving into a new house, the loss of a loved one, but not a traumatic bereavement, or financial worries under the umbrella are all under the umbrella of little t trauma. Most humans will go through these experiences some point in their lives, so it's more expected to experience little t trauma, and therefore it's not given the emphasis, the same levels that um, type 1, type 2, or secondary trauma are given. Um, To me, honestly, everyone in their life is going to experience little t trauma. And I do feel like one of the biggest causes of little t trauma, especially in today's economy, is a lack of financial security. If you are constantly worried about finances and losing your job, and you're looking at the state of the world, and it's just one mental battle after the other to try and keep yourself joyful in the Lord. Trust me, been there, done that, got a t-shirt. Okay, this is something that we can be honest about. I think almost all of us experience. um Specifically me now. I'm gonna be so real with y'all. I haven't had a job in about 5 months. 5 months. Okay. So the stress of finances is definitely in there. But that is when, again, you have to renew your mind daily with the word and know that God is going to provide. Trust me, I know it's easier said than done. I'm not here to shame you because you're struggling with your faith. Okay. If you're struggling with God, you're doing it right. Because if everything is sunshine and rainbows and your relationship with God is perfect, that's a lie. And you need to ask Him to strip you down, reveal your heart, reveal things that you didn't even know about yourself. Ask Him to reveal you to you. Because I'm telling you, if everything is going perfectly, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship. Not even human relationships are perfect. So, yeah, that ain't gonna flag her. You got try again. Um, but yeah, little T trauma is the most common trauma. I do feel like it should be given the same emphasis as, type 1, type 2, secondary trauma, because to me, honestly, trauma is trauma. It's going to alter you mentally. It's going to cause you to act in certain ways. Um, because it's going to affect how you move through the world. How do you respond to situations? How you know, deal with your friendships, whether romantic or, platonic. It's going to affect all of it, regardless of what type of trauma it is. Just how they say sin is sin, trauma is trauma. It's all the same in my eyes, honestly. I do think it's very important that, um, your experiences are in different categories, but trauma in itself, I feel like, there's truly no difference. Trauma is trauma, and I think that's a personal belief. But I do feel like, you know it's all going to affect you the same way, as in how it alters the way you think and the way you operate. It's going to affect you emotionally. So yeah. By the way, the definitions of trauma that I'm reading are from the blog Unresolved. What a sudden family death taught me about my trauma. If you'd like to go read it, awesome. If not, totally fine. But yes, I truly break down, like, the different types of trauma. I talk about my own trauma and realizing where it came from, and really like going back to my roots, that childhood. Y'all, if you haven't done the work to unpack the trauma that you experienced in your childhood, even if you don't feel like you have any, if you haven't done the work to unpack trauma that you may have experienced in your childhood, um, do that, because it is life changing. I haven't completely fixed everything that I've needed to fix, but I've been able to address a lot. And I've been able to learn why I've operated a certain way, why I had certain behaviors, why I kept choosing the same men in relationships, or, why I would put myself in these situations with friendships where all my friendships are one sided because I give and give and give because I have a fear of abandonment and a fear of rejection. Like, just if you've never done it, really go back to your childhood and try to dissect or pinpoint any moments where you may have developed a trauma. Um, and on the flip side of that, if you've never done the research about generational trauma, because that's a real thing, okay? When they say everything is spiritual, everything is spiritual. I don't care. I don't care. I sound crazy. I don't care. When I die, I'm going to take that up with him. I ain't worried about what you think about me. Everything is spiritual. So if you've never asked your parents or your grandparents what their childhoods were like, what they dealt with from their parents, the kind of stuff that was passed down, and just ask questions about their lives. And then you'll notice the patterns. And then that might give you an idea of the things that you are going to have to fight so your children don't. Because generational trauma is so real too. Like, for me, because I have a fear of rejection, a fear of abandonment and daddy issues and things like that, but then talking to my mom and talking, well, not necessarily to my grandma, because my grandma, I love her, but sometimes she likes to pretend that her past didn't happen. But these are things that we need to be talking about as people so that I can save my family from what y'all went through. But the pattern that I noticed is like a lot of the women in my family, they had held abusive relationships, whether that was physical, mental, emotional, and almost every woman in my family has had a child out of wedlock and had fatherless homes. And here I am at the ripe age of, I'm not going to tell y'all, no kids, no husband. And I think it's because I noticed the pattern. And when I picked up on it, I was like, oh, so this is something I need to be aware of because, you know, I don't want my kids to experience the feelings that I felt of anger and resentment and feeling like you're not good enough. And like, if you're not good enough, the person that loves you was going to leave you. And you have to know that you're enough in God's eyes. And that's something that, obviously has to be built, but it's doable. And so, yeah, I said all that to say, like, just ask questions. Find out what you're dealing with. Find out what you're fighting against because you never know. Generational trauma could be anxiety or depression, from financial stresses. But then that's another thing, financial generational trauma, because no one in your family has ever been disciplined with money. No one's ever been good with money. Like, there's so many things that are tied to it because everything is spiritual. Again, I don't care. Okay? Because if no one in your family has ever been good with money and taught you how to be good with money, guess what's going to be your downfall? And guess what that's going to cause? That's going to make you deal with little t trauma and financial stresses and that sort of thing. It's like it's all tied together. I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but y'all get it, right? You get it. You understand. Okay, right. So let's move on. um Now, some of the things that, other things I do want to discuss. So, like, say you've never done the work with your family to ask questions and figure out what the generational traumas are that you need to start working on so your kids have a fighting chance at a joyful and peaceful life, right? Say you've never done that work, but something happens and you're triggered and you don't quite know what it is. So I looked up physical signs that your body is experiencing trauma or releasing trauma. Um, Obviously, the Lord could tell us through dreams. He could speak to us and tell us something that we need to work on. Obviously, He is very capable of doing those things, but these are also physical signs that you could look out for. So sudden emotional release, like something small happened and you burst into tears. There's a deeper reason for that. Another thing is um, vivid dreams, digestive system shifts. So, what we call the bubble guts. That could be your discernment acting up. That could be, there are physical signs that your body will express that like something deeper is happening, right? So, um, also temporary increases in anxiety and hypervigilance. So you're constantly questioning the things around you because something triggered you. Also, muscle tension release. Something I noticed that I did is that when I would have confrontation, I was so scared to have confrontations with people that I love because I felt like, okay, if I am confronting them about this thing that made me upset, they might get mad and never talk to me again. I have that fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. So I noticed when I would start to get into confrontations with people, I would freeze, which is also a direct trauma response. And I would always be tense, like my shoulders would be like this. And I walked around like that for a really long time. And I was scrolling, doom scrolling, as one does when they are trying to escape their mental. Don't judge me, judge mama. Um, and the man pops in the video and he goes, "Hey, release your shoulders, unclench your jaw." And I was like, "Oh, wow. I didn't even know I was doing that." I was walking around like that for the longest time. And so now I've caught myself when I'm tense and my body just needs to relax. That also comes from a regulated nervous system. I'm telling you, do the research to figure out what your trauma triggers are. It's going to do you a world of good because even if you don't know where to start, again, you could just start by asking your family questions like, "Hey, like um what was grandma like when you were growing up, or like what was your childhood like?" And honestly, if you ask your parents, 9 times out of 10 you'll get both sides. You'll get what they dealt with, and then you can kind of get an idea of what your grandparents dealt with by how they raised your parents. But again, that's, you also have to have grace for people because, like I said, people operate at their level of understanding. And when you know that, you'll have more grace for people. It's like, oh, you did that because that was the best you knew how to do at the time. Um, and that also brings me into a really great point. Even if you are dealing with mental health illnesses or issues or, trauma, there are things in you that need to be healed. Healing is a choice. So if you know that you have things that you need to heal from actively and you are choosing not to, that's on you. Because knowing that you're going through the world possibly hurting other people because, again, you're operating at your level of understanding, you don't understand that you're hurting the people in your life, that you're pushing people away, that you're in survival mode. You don't know that. But once you do know that and you decide not to do anything about it, that's on you. That is a choice. Healing is a choice. You have to actively decide, okay, I know I have these issues. I want to fix them. Not only for the people in my life now, but for my children in the future. Because I don't want them to deal with the same things that I dealt with. So yeah, I just want to throw that little tidbit in there. And if you feel convicted, good. Go get some therapy. Uh-huh. Um, so again, that is like physical bodily responses to trauma. Now, um, there are 4 trauma response types, which I did not know, but I am guilty of all of these. Yeah. So the first trauma response is fight, an aggressive reaction to a threat. Um, so think of, unfortunately, I do think of like physically abusive relationships where someone might be backed into a corner and they feel like they have no choice but to fight to show that they're not scared and to get themselves out of that situation. Um, that's an example of that. So, flight, the urge to desperately get away from a traumatic situation. So, that's also you're willing to do anything and everything to get out of what you're dealing with. You're willing to hurt other people. You're willing to stoop low to save your life, what by any means necessary you're willing to get out of that situation. And honestly, it's almost like you have nothing left to lose, so you're going to do whatever you need to do to get out of that situation. And honestly, that's a dangerous place to be. So we have fight, flight. The next one is freeze. So this is a state of paralysis in active trauma. So, okay, y'all don't clock me because I know how y'all like to tussle. All right. I do watch a lot of true crime documentaries. I'm not going to hold you, but I know how to save my own life if I were to ever, God forbid, get into any of these types of situations. And a lot of the times, what I hear these women saying when they're in active trauma, like these men are terrorizing them and they have every chance to fight back, and they say, I just froze. I didn't know what I was so scared. That is a trauma response. Freezing and just letting it unfold in an active traumatic situation. So I need you to know right now that if that is something that you have ever done, do not be ashamed of that. It is a trauma response. It is normal. Not normal what you're going through, but it's normal to have that response in a traumatic situation to freeze because you are so full of fear. Totally valid. Okay. We're here. I'm with you on that one. Okay. And the next one is fawn. This is me all day. Okay. Fawn, to please or appease others in the face of trauma to avoid conflict. Who does that sound like? Oh, me. I got some work to do. But again, I've identified that in myself. So I know it's something that I need to actively work on. You see where I'm going? You see you picking up what I'm putting down? We here. You got me. All right, cool. Um, all of this to say, again, to bring it full circle into what I talked about at the beginning of this episode. We have got to stop the stigmas around mental health in the Christian spaces. We've got to start talking about it because the more you don't talk about a thing, the more it has power. Prime example, how Christians are so scared to talk about sex. Um, God invented sex. He wants you to have it. He wants you to enjoy it. But if we are not educating our younger believers, they're going to go outside of God's word and outside of God's will to figure it out for themselves. So we've got to start talking about these taboo things that are not taboo at all. That's just the human experience. And God knows all of this already. And He promised to walk through it with us. Um, and before I end this, I do want to say that um, the toxic positivity, it doesn't help. The oh, you struggle with anxiety and depression? Oh my god, you just need to pray. Like go read your Bible. Like it's it could be worse. It could be worse. You could be, like you could have XYZ instead. Like, shut up. Just stop. Okay? The toxic positivity is just that. It is toxic. And honestly, can probably contribute to some people's mental illnesses and the traumas that they experience within the Christian community because y'all are so crazy. Y'all are weird sometimes. Like, y'all are weird. Like, I claim Christianity, but sometimes y'all are getting weird. Okay? Um, yeah, so keep the toxic positivity comments to yourself. Like, if someone opens up to you and feels safe enough with you to say, hey, I struggle with depression. I'm struggling with my relationship with God because I have depression. I feel like I don't have enough faith. Oh, you just gotta pray. You just don't have enough faith. And you just, no, it's not how you deal with that. They felt safe enough to come to you to admit that. So you offer your listening ear, and sometimes that's all you need to do is listen. Sometimes they may already have the solutions figured out. They don't need you to solve anything. They just need you to be their brother and sister in Christ and listen. But if they do ask you for help, look up resources and options and things together. Because toxic positivity, it does more harm than good. I promise you it doesn't help this person at all. Um, because the whole I just need to read your Bible more, you just need to pray. Don't you think they've tried that already? And if it was helping, they probably wouldn't feel the need to talk to you about it or to seek extra help, to reach out to someone. They don't even know what the outcome of the conversation is, but they just need to get it out and talk to somebody else. So let's keep the positivity comments to ourselves and keep pumpkin. Can we do that? Can we do that? That'd be great. Um, but yeah, trauma and mental health and it's so nuanced. It's not just black and white. It looks different on everybody because everybody's gonna have a different trauma. Everybody deals with different generational things. But again, do that research to try and figure out what you're fighting against and give yourself a fighting chance to at least build a foundation you can start working towards that actual freedom and mental health. Um, but also don't be afraid to talk about what you're going through, even if it's still active. Now, if you are in a state where you've experienced a trauma, a violent trauma, and it's still very fresh, of course, do your healing in silence with the Lord. Go to therapy, talk to God, talk to your therapist, and work that out with Him. Build that relationship with Him, that health with Him, that intimacy with Him. But I do, again, want to reiterate like, please talk about these things in Christian spaces. We need it. We need it. We need it. We need it so bad because sometimes your life might be the only testimony of God's love that someone else gets to see. You might be the seed that gets planted in their spirit to eventually want to reach out to God and have a relationship with Him. And it doesn't have to happen right away. Our job isn't to win souls, it's to plant seeds, okay? So please, like, don't be afraid to talk about your traumas and the things that you're dealing with. I just told y'all all my business. I was hurt by my dad. I got rejection issues. I have fear of abandonment. I don't like confrontation. I like, what else do y'all want to know? Like, because I'm an open book. That is the whole point of Holy and Healing, because I'm walking through my healing actively, and two things can be true at once. I'm working on my relationship with God and I'm working on my healing, and the two can coexist. They don't have to be separate from each other. And it's also to show that healing is not a linear thing. It's constant. Healing is constant. Like, I'm probably gonna get triggered by things for the rest of my life. And my future husband probably gonna be tired of me. Like, I'm probably gonna be asking him the night before the wedding, "You sure you want to do this? You still like me? Like, are you sure, boo?" But those are things I know I have to actively work on. Don't come for me, okay? Like, but yeah, holy and healing. Two things can coexist. They can coincide. It's totally fine. There should be no shame around struggling with your mental health and struggling in your faith. But as long as you keep pushing towards the mark, keep your eyes on Him and keep going, that is what makes the difference. Um, so yeah, I think I told y'all all of my business. And that's enough sharing for the day. So if the class doesn't have any further questions, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this episode up. If y'all are new here, hi, welcome. So happy you're here. But this is our third episode. Third episode. We 3 weeks in, baby. Locked and loaded. But yeah, if you're new here, so happy you're here. If you're come back for this episode, thanks for coming back. I'm glad that you like me enough to come back. Hopefully I will see you next week. If not, totally fine. I'll be here regardless. Don't forget to like, comment, share, tell your friends. One thing I will do also is I want to add some resources in the description of this video just for anyone who might be currently struggling with their mental health issues and you don't really know where to start. I'm going to include some resources that I found while doing my research, just some websites and things, um some therapy websites that work with your insurance that might possibly be free. um but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. With Mental Health Awareness Month, I just thought it was so important to touch on these topics and really not be scared to talk about them, dive into them. I'd love to continue the discussion in the comments if you guys have any questions about anything I talked about or just, questions in general. Yeah, throw them down in the comments. Also, um, I do offer free prayer calls on the website. And, um, and I did that because it just points back to what I want this space to be. I want it to be a space where believers and non believers alike feel safe enough to open up and be vulnerable about what they're experiencing in their healing journeys. And, again, if it plants the seed in someone, great. But what the prayer call is for us to come together as a unit, to touch and agree, to, pray over you and, um, just if you even just need to vent, if you need a little vent session, that's fine too. It'll be your prayer call slash vent session. You just want to yap for an hour and, talk to someone who doesn't know your life. That's fine too. That's what those are for. But yeah, again, thank you guys for being here. I love you. God loves you more, and I hope you are healing.